April 20th, 2010, Gulf of Mexico, 9:49 p.m. The ocean is black and calm. 40 miles off the Louisiana coast, a floating city of steel glows under floodlights. The Deepwater Horizon stands 396 feet tall, towering above the waterline. Inside, alarms begin to flicker. Mud shoots up the drilling pipe. Pressure spikes. On the bridge, someone shouts. Then, a blast rips through the rig. Fire erupts into the night sky, visible from miles away. 11 men vanish in the chaos. In just 11 minutes, the largest marine oil spill in American history begins. But the explosion wasn't random. It was the result of decisions, warnings, shortcuts, and a pressure test that didn't make sense. So what really happened on the Deepwater Horizon? The Deepwater Horizon wasn't just a machine. It was a floating industrial fortress. Owned by Transocean and leased by BP, the rig was drilling the Macondo prospect, an exploratory oil well nearly 18,000 feet below sea level. Nearly 126 crew members lived aboard at any given time, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. The men worked 12-hour shifts, surrounded by steel corridors, humming generators, and the constant smell of oil and machinery. Some were veterans with decades of offshore experience. Others were young fathers saving for families back home. The Macondo well was already behind schedule. Behind schedule meant over budget, and behind budget meant pressure, not just underground, but in corporate offices thousands of miles away. The well was costing BP nearly $1 million per day. Every delay mattered. Drilling at 5,000 feet of ocean depth is not forgiving. The deeper you drill, the higher the pressure from underground reservoirs. If that pressure is not contained, oil and gas can surge upward in a violent event known as a blowout. To prevent this, wells are sealed with layers of steel casing and cement. But at Macondo, the cement job was complicated. Halliburton engineers had flagged concerns about the stability of the well design. Internal emails later revealed discussions about severe lost returns and unstable formation zones. Yet the project moved forward. On April 20th, the crew prepared for a critical test, a negative pressure test. This test would determine whether the cement seal was truly holding back the hydrocarbons below. If the test failed, it would mean gas was leaking into the well. The first test showed abnormal pressure readings. That should have stopped everything, but it didn't. The results were debated. Some interpreted the pressure as a bladder effect. Others suggested it was trapped fluid. The test was repeated. Again, unusual readings. But by late afternoon, the test was declared successful. The well was deemed secure. It wasn't. 7 p.m. The crew begins replacing heavy drilling mud, which suppresses pressure, with lighter seawater. Drilling mud is dense. It keeps underground pressure contained. Seawater is not. As the mud is displaced, gas begins creeping upward through the well, unnoticed or misunderstood. At 9:40 p.m., mud starts shooting onto the rig floor. Moments later, methane gas reaches the surface. Gas alarms activate, but witnesses later testified that some alarms had been bypassed to prevent false triggers. Then, at 9:49 p.m., the gas finds an ignition source. A massive explosion tears through the rig. Flames shoot 300 feet into the air. The platform shakes violently. Men are thrown across rooms. Windows shatter. The Deepwater Horizon is now a burning inferno. And the blowout preventer, the final failsafe sitting on the ocean floor, is about to face the ultimate test. Coast Guard helicopters scramble into the night. Supply vessels race toward the blaze. Survivors leap from the rig into dark water below. Some suffer broken bones, others burns. 11 men are missing. Despite 36 hours of firefighting, the flames cannot be contained. On April 22nd, the Deepwater Horizon sinks beneath the Gulf, but the disaster is only beginning. Because now, 5,000 feet below the surface, the Macondo well is still flowing. At first, officials estimate the leak at 1,000 barrels per day, then 5,000, then 20,000. Eventually, government scientists determine it is closer to 60,000 barrels per day. Oil gushes unchecked from the damaged wellhead. Underwater cameras capture a haunting image, crude oil billowing into the ocean like black smoke. The blowout preventer, a 450-ton stack of valves designed to seal the well, failed to activate. Later forensic analysis would reveal multiple issues: a miswired solenoid valve, a dead battery in the control pod, a bent drill pipe preventing full closure. Redundancy failed. Layer after layer of protection failed. And now the Gulf of Mexico is turning black. Oil begins washing ashore in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. Pelicans coated in crude struggle to fly. Dolphins surface in contaminated waters. Sea turtles wash up dead. Over 1,300 miles of coastline are affected. Fishing grounds close. Tourism collapses. Entire communities dependent on shrimping and oyster harvesting face financial ruin. BP attempts containment. A massive steel dome is lowered over the well. It fails. A top-kill procedure, pumping mud to stop the flow, fails. Weeks turn into months. Each day, millions of gallons pour into the Gulf. By the time the well is capped on July 15, 2010, approximately 4.9 million barrels of oil have been released. It becomes the largest accidental marine oil spill in history. As oil spreads, so does public outrage. President Barack Obama calls it the worst environmental disaster America has ever faced. BP CEO Tony Hayward becomes the face of corporate insensitivity after saying, "I'd like my life back." Internal BP documents reveal cost-cutting measures. Investigations show that BP chose a cheaper casing design. They skipped a cement bond log test that might have detected failure. They opted for fewer centralizers in the well, despite engineer recommendations. Each decision saved time. Each decision saved money, but together they created catastrophic risk. And now the bill is coming due. Federal investigations begin. The National Commission on the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill publishes its findings in 2011. The conclusion: the disaster was preventable. It was the result of systemic failures in risk management. BP, Transocean, and Halliburton share responsibility, but BP bears the brunt. In 2015, BP agrees to a $20.8 billion settlement, the largest environmental settlement in U.S. history. Criminal charges are filed. Executives face scrutiny. Yet for many Gulf residents, justice feels incomplete. 11 families still mourn. Entire ecosystems remain altered. Years later, studies show lingering oil in marshlands. Dolphin populations experience reproductive failure. Deep-sea coral communities show damage a decade later. Although tourism eventually rebounds, trust in offshore drilling never fully recovers. Regulations tighten. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management implements stricter safety requirements. Blowout preventer standards are revised, but critics argue enforcement remains vulnerable to political change. The Deepwater Horizon disaster exposed a fundamental tension: energy demand versus environmental risk. The world runs on oil, yet extracting it from extreme depths multiplies complexity. The deeper we drill, the smaller the margin for error. Macondo wasn't just a mechanical failure, it was a systems failure. Corporate culture, regulatory oversight, human interpretation of warning signs. The explosion didn't begin at 9:49 p.m. It began weeks earlier, in emails, budget meetings, and risk calculations. Return to April 20th, 2010. The ocean is calm. The rig glows in the darkness. Pressure readings flicker. Someone sees abnormal numbers. Someone hesitates. Someone decides it's probably fine. 11 minutes later, flames light up the Gulf. The Deepwater Horizon sinks. Oil rises, and the world is reminded of something brutal and simple. In high-risk systems, small decisions don't stay small. They compound, they stack, until one night they explode.